You hear it before you see him. A father's voice, cracking on the word, bang. She was 5'3", 115 pounds. Bang. Dead. Gone. In a packed hearing room in Washington, D.C. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. Cameras click. And a man from a small town in North Carolina is trying to do the hardest thing any parent can imagine. Put his child's final moments into words. His name is Stephen Federico. His daughter's name was Logan Hailey Federico. She was 22 years old. On the morning of May 3, 2025, Logan wasn't in a war zone or a dangerous alleyway. She was in a quiet college neighborhood in Columbia, South Carolina, sleeping in a rented house on Cypress Street. After a normal night out with friends, what happened next would ripple from that little house, through 2 states, and all the way to Congress. Stephen leans into the microphone, his hands clenched together as if he's still trying to hold on to her. Think about your child, he tells the lawmakers. Think about your child coming home from a night out with their friends, laying down, going to sleep, feeling somebody come in the room and wake them and drag her out of bed. The room is silent. No one interrupts. No one moves. Because on that night in Columbia, police say a 30-year-old repeat offender, a man with a long criminal record named Alexander Devonte Dickey, slipped into the darkness of that same house. He was already in the middle of a multi-day crime spree. Stolen gun, stolen car, stolen cards, when he crossed the threshold of Logan's temporary home. Inside, in a bedroom that should have been safe, Logan was shot once in the chest. Her friends woke to the sound of the gunshot. Paramedics did everything they could, but by the time the sun came up over Columbia on May 3rd, Logan was gone. For most families, that's where the story would end, with a senseless murder in a courtroom years down the line. But Logan's case didn't end there, because when investigators and reporters started digging into the man accused of killing her, they found something that made this already unthinkable tragedy feel even worse. This wasn't just a random act of violence by an unknown stranger. This was a crime committed, allegedly, by someone the system had seen again and again and again, and repeatedly released. Nearly 40 prior arrests, roughly 25 felonies on his record, only about 600 days actually spent in prison. And, buried in the paperwork, a clerical error so serious that officials now say it might have helped keep him out of a cell when he should have still been behind bars. That's why Stephen is here, in front of microphones and cameras, instead of at home in Waxhaw with his daughter. He looks up at the people in power and says, "You woke up a beast. You pissed off the wrong daddy, because I'm not going to be quiet until somebody helps." In that moment, Logan's story stops being just a local crime report. It becomes something larger, a test of what happens when a justice system misses warning signs, shuffles files, and lets a known threat keep walking free. But before we talk about the crime spree, the manhunt, or the political firestorm that followed, we need to step away from the hearing room and go back to where this really starts. Not with a criminal record, not with a clerical error, with a young woman in her favorite color, laughing with friends, planning a future she'll never see. Because to understand how sickening this case truly is, we first have to understand who Logan Federico was and what was taken from the world when she never came home. She was the girl in pink. That's how her family describes her. Not just because it was her favorite color, but because it fit her spirit. Bright, bold, impossible to ignore. Logan Hailey Federico grew up in Waxhaw, North Carolina, a small town about 20 miles south of Charlotte. The kind of place where people still wave when they pass each other at stoplights, and everyone seems to know your family name. Her friends called her Lolo. Her little brother, Jacob, gave her that nickname when he was still learning to talk, and it stuck. Her dad, Stephen, had another one, Spicy. Because Logan wasn't just kind, she had a spark. If she set her mind to something, she got it done. She was a college student juggling classes at a local community college with 2 jobs. One of them was at a sports bar in Charlotte, a place called Duckworth's, where coworkers say she could light up the whole shift just by walking in. To customers, She was the friendly face behind the counter. To her friends, she was the glue that held their group together, the one who texted first, remembered birthdays, and left voice notes instead of simple replies. To her father, she was a promise. Logan had dreams that were refreshingly simple. She wanted to teach. She loved kids, she mentored younger students, helped out with youth programs, and talked about having her own classroom one day. When people remember her now, they don't talk about tragedy first. They talk about joy. They talk about the way she sang Taylor Swift's 22 every year on her birthday, the playlist she made for every road trip, and the way she'd start dancing before anyone else had even finished pouring a drink. After she died, hundreds of mourners filled the church in Waxhaw. Nearly everyone wore pink, her signature color, at her celebration of life. That night, Logan and her friends headed downtown. Columbia's nightlife is familiar to anyone who's ever gone to college. There are live bands on Hardin Street, late-night diners, and a stretch of neon signs that spill into the humid air. Friends would later say it was a typical night. Dancing, selfies, laughter. No one noticed the headlines that would soon make Columbia infamous. After midnight, they caught a ride back to the Cypress Street house. The lights from downtown faded behind them as they drove through quiet residential streets, still damp from a spring rain. By all accounts, the group got home safe. They locked up, kicked off their shoes, and started winding down the kind of gentle end to a carefree night. Logan found a guest bedroom, probably left her phone on the charger, maybe scrolled through messages before drifting off. Outside, the neighborhood was calm. A dog barked somewhere down the street. A single porch light flickered across the sidewalk. But not far away, a different story was unfolding. Across town, police believe a man was already prowling, moving between homes under cover of darkness. Earlier that same evening, someone had reported a burglary nearby, a stolen firearm, stolen car, and a suspect who had slipped away before officers arrived. No one in the Cypress Street house knew that yet. For them, the world still felt safe. The front door was locked. The windows closed. They couldn't have known that the man behind those other burglaries, a career criminal who should have been in prison, was already in their neighborhood. And before dawn, his path would lead straight to their door. What started as a peaceful college weekend would soon become the center of a statewide manhunt, and the moment a broken justice system came crashing into one family's life. It was one of those early May weekends in the South. Heavy air, azaleas in bloom, the kind of warmth that lingers long after sunset. For Logan Federico, it was meant to be a break. She'd spent the past few months grinding through school and 2 jobs, and when a college friend invited her down to Columbia, South Carolina, she said yes without hesitation. Just a couple of nights away, laughter, food, sleepovers, and inside jokes that never made it to social media. The house they rented was a cozy 2-story home on Cypress Street, tucked inside the Shandon neighborhood, a leafy pocket just a few blocks from the University of South Carolina. The streets there are lined with oak trees and wide porches, the kind of place where you hear cicadas more than sirens. On Friday, May 2nd, Logan texted her dad. "Made it safe. Love you." He texted back a quick, "Love you too, Lolo." He had no idea it would be the last message he'd ever get from her. The night before Logan's death, a different kind of pattern was playing out across Columbia, one stitched together by a man who had spent more than half his life dodging accountability. His name was Alexander Devonte Dickey. 30 years old, born and raised in South Carolina. A man whose mugshot had become a recurring entry in the state's criminal database. Dozens of arrests, multiple felonies, and yet, for reasons still being investigated, he was free. It was just after 3 a.m., the kind of quiet hour when the world feels half asleep. The rain had stopped. The streetlights outside the Cypress Street house buzzed faintly in the damp air. Inside, 3 young women, Logan Federico and her 2 college friends, were fast asleep after a long night out in Columbia. They had no reason to lock their bedroom doors. The neighborhood was calm, lined with family homes and oak trees that rustled gently in the wind. But down the block, a figure was moving, According to police investigators, Alexander Devonte Dickey, armed with a stolen 12-gauge shotgun, had been circling the Shandon neighborhood for hours, searching for another easy target. At some point in those early hours of May 3rd, 2025, he made his way to the Cypress Street home. Investigators believe he pried open a back door or window, slipping inside while the house slept. The intruder moved quietly, room to room, flashlight in hand, taking wallets, credit cards, anything within reach. Then, he opened the door to a dark bedroom, Logan's bedroom. She was just 22, small, barely 5'3", still half dreaming, half asleep. When she opened her eyes, there was a stranger standing over her, tall, armed, and faceless in the shadows. The gun was pointed at her chest. Her friends would later tell police they woke to the sound of a single blast echoing through the hallway. A moment later came the screams, raw, confused, desperate. Logan's friends ran toward the noise, one flipping on the hallway light, the other already dialing 911. In the doorway, they saw her on the floor, blood spreading across her shirt. The intruder was still there, a flash of movement, the glint of a barrel before he bolted into the night. Outside, he jumped into the stolen car parked nearby and vanished down the slick street. Back inside, chaos. One friend pressed a towel to Logan's chest, begging her to stay awake. Another tried to guide the dispatcher through sobs, telling them their friend had been shot, that the shooter was gone. When first responders arrived minutes later, the house was a blur of flashing lights and terror. Paramedics worked furiously, CPR, compressions, oxygen, but the wound was catastrophic. Logan Federico was pronounced dead at the scene. The house that just hours earlier had been filled with music and laughter was now a crime scene, yellow tape fluttering in the humid wind, evidence markers glinting in the light of police flashlights. Inside, investigators recovered a single spent shotgun shell on the bedroom floor. No fingerprints, no footprints. The intruder had worn gloves. He'd left nothing behind except devastation. As dawn broke over Columbia, the sky turned pale gray. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, dogs combing through backyards, helicopters grounded by an incoming storm. Every second counted. The killer was out there armed, unpredictable, and now desperate. What police didn't yet know was that Logan's stolen credit cards would soon begin to ping across county lines, and those signals would lead them straight into the path of a burning house and the man they were chasing. When the first 911 calls came in from Cypress Street, dispatchers in Columbia didn't yet realize the scale of what they were hearing. A break-in, a gunshot, a young woman down. Within minutes, the quiet Shandon neighborhood was flooded with blue and red lights. Detectives from the Columbia Police Department arrived just before sunrise on May 3rd, 2025. They sealed off the block with yellow tape, photographing tire marks on the wet pavement, collecting that single shotgun casing from Logan's bedroom floor. But there were no fingerprints, no shell wadding, no footprints. The killer had worn gloves, moved with precision, and vanished before the storm clouds broke. A thunderstorm rolled through that morning, sheets of rain washing away tracks, grounding the police helicopter that had been preparing to search from above. Still, investigators pressed on, canvassing every corner of Shandon for witnesses and security footage. They knew they were racing a clock. Then came the first break. Just a few hours after the murder, someone began using Logan's stolen bank cards, first at a gas station in Lexington County, then at convenience stores further west. Each transaction left a digital footprint. Investigators pulled surveillance video from the first location, and frame by frame, they saw him, a man in dark clothes, baseball cap low, matching the vague description given by witnesses at Cypress Street. That was the moment the case changed. Columbia detectives shared the footage with Lexington County deputies, triggering a multi-agency manhunt. Patrol cars spread out across back roads, while K-9 teams scoured wooded lots and drainage ditches. Late that Saturday night, officers found the stolen vehicle abandoned at the edge of a rural road, engine dead, water pooled beneath the tires. The rain had shorted its ignition. Whoever had been driving it was now on foot. By Sunday morning, May 4th, the manhunt was entering its second day. That's when Lexington County deputies got a call about another break-in and a fire at a home in the small town of Gaston, South Carolina, barely 30 minutes from Columbia. When they arrived, smoke was pouring from a single-story house. Inside, a man was still moving. Deputies broke a window, pulled him out, and quickly realized who they had. Alexander Devonte Dickey, wanted for the murder of Logan Federico, the armed burglar who had eluded them for nearly 36 hours, was finally in custody. He was coughing from smoke inhalation, his hands scraped from broken glass, but otherwise uninjured. Officers placed him in handcuffs on the front lawn as firefighters battled the flames behind them. The shotgun was gone, possibly destroyed in the blaze, but evidence from the stolen car and the purchases linked everything together. When news of the arrest broke later that day, Columbia residents exhaled. For 2 days, a killer had been loose in their city. Now, at last, the hunt was over. But for investigators, the relief was temporary. The next phase, understanding who Dickey was and how someone with such a violent past had been walking free, would prove even more disturbing than the crime itself. The arrest was supposed to bring closure. Instead, it opened a new mystery. How had a man with nearly 40 arrests managed to keep escaping prison walls? When Alexander Devonte Dickey was booked into the Lexington County Jail on May 4, 2025, investigators began combing through his past. What they found was not just a criminal record. It was a roadmap of systemic failure stretching over more than a decade. Every few lines told the same story: arrest, plea deal, parole, violation, release. Again and again. By the time Logan Federico was killed, Dickey had been arrested at least 39 times, facing around 25 felony charges, everything from burglary and car theft to strong-arm robbery and drug possession. Yet, over all those years, he had served a total of less than 2 years behind bars. To investigators, it seemed impossible. How could someone with that history still be free? As they traced his timeline, a troubling pattern came into focus. 2014, 2017. Dickey served roughly 3 years for grand larceny and burglary, his first significant prison term. 2018. Released early, he was back behind bars within months on a drug charge, serving only a few months. 2019, 2020. Convicted of robbery, sentenced to over a year, but released on parole after serving less than the full term. 2023. Arrested again for burglary, this time facing what should have been a 5 to 10-year sentence. But due to clerical gaps in his record, prosecutors treated it as a first offense. Each time, Dickey walked free earlier than expected, often because probation violations weren't enforced, paperwork lagged, or previous convictions didn't appear in statewide databases. Logan's father would later tell Congress, through tears, he should have been in jail for over 140 years for all the crimes he committed. You know how much time he spent? 600 days. It wasn't exaggeration. In South Carolina's overloaded criminal justice system, many low and mid-level offenders cycle through county jails like revolving doors. But Dickey's record stood out. Even seasoned officers said they'd never seen someone rack up so many serious charges and remain on the streets. Somewhere between paperwork, plea deals, and parole hearings, the system had simply stopped keeping track. Prosecutors now say that by 2023, key entries in Dickey's criminal history were missing, particularly a 2014 burglary arrest that never made it into the State Law Enforcement Division's SLED database because his fingerprints were never uploaded. When that record vanished from the system, it erased years of context. Judges and prosecutors looking at his file couldn't see the full picture. So when Dickey faced the court again in 2023, he looked on paper like a low-level offender. And because of that, he was offered a plea deal that let him walk after time served. The tragic irony? He had served 411 days in county jail waiting for that case to be resolved. When the judge accepted the deal, those 411 days became his entire sentence. He was released, still on probation. Free? Less than a year later, Logan Federico was dead. It's the kind of story that seems unthinkable, a deadly chain reaction set off not by a single decision, but by hundreds of small ones. A missing fingerprint, a data entry mistake, an overlooked violation. Dickey's rap sheet was more than a record. It was a warning system that no one ever heard. And when the truth about that clerical error finally came out, it didn't just expose one man's crimes. It revealed a breakdown in the machinery of justice itself.